Thank you, Roy. Fantastic stuff. I can say that, from my work as very much a generalist working across many taxonomic groups, having access to this kind of curated data set through the Lurks is just invaluable. So that's great. So if we can have Adam and Simon back online now, we'll do our best to take a few of the questions that have been coming in. Everybody there, you can hear us, Simon? Looks like he's there. Yeah, fine.
Yeah, so, yeah, I'm just turning on my mic.
As luck would have it, there's a question coming which I think was a lovely segue between the two talks. It's a question actually for Simon, but I'm going to direct it first to Adam and Roy as the curators of the data set from Sorrel Jones. How are you accounting for inaccuracies within the Lurk data set, such as unverified records, low resolution records, or duplicated records? Now, this is a question to Simon, so, but as the curators of the data set, first of all, you can tell us how much of a problem it is, and if it is a problem, then we'll ask Simon how he deals with it. How's that?
I'm happy to dive in just quickly, first of all, to say low resolution data is sort of unavoidable. I'm sure Simon's analysis is reading some of that very coarse data. We prefer data at 1 kilometre square or finer resolution, and definite preference for 6 good reference or less. Unverified data, we're running at about 60% verified in Wales, probably higher in some regions than in SeaRec. I think it's 70+ in some regions. I still work on a precautionary principle. I'd rather, if a recorder reported a sighting, that we could take it into account. And this is for coming from my traditional Lurk viewpoint. I'd rather the sighting could be taken into account rather than nobody be aware of it until we waited for that unlikely verifications. We rely on some verifiers from quite obscure groups, and the verification times are disappointingly slow in some cases. It's nobody's fault. It's just that there aren't that many experts constantly online verifying. So unverified data is, for me, is part and parcel of the Lurk service. But I'm sure Simon has a view on that in terms of the statistical significance of those records. So I think. Sorry, Roy, you want to say anything?
And the other part of the question was also duplicate records as well.
Well, I just know that this is one of the questions that was actually by. Sorry, yeah, this is. I was just going to say this is one of the questions that was asked by us by the M group actually.
Roy's having technical difficulties, eh?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can just about. Yeah, I'll take take it over. The Welsh Government did query this when deciding whether or not to provide Lurk data to the CH UK for the indicator 44 work, and we obviously came up with a set of strong arguments to persuade them that it was still worth using the data despite imperfections within it. Duplication is just something that we just have to live with, and I'd much rather have a record twice or 3 times or 4 times and deal with the inconvenience of duplication than not have it at all. So never risk. Don't ever think I'm not sending that in because somebody else will have done, because they probably haven't.
Good, great. So in that case, then to you, Simon, how do you deal with these inaccuracies in your computations?
Well, I guess in terms of the technical processing, we want this to be as streamlined and as repeatable and transparent as possible. So when we did the review back in 2019, we basically plumbed together the first key part of the workflow that we'll revisit when we do the trends modeling, which is the connection between the Lurk database and the machinery based at BRC that screens those records and ends up with a kind of cut of data to go forward for the modeling. So we work with Adam and Roy to put in place various criteria that were, I think I remember, fairly conservative. You know, we, as Adam mentioned, we went for 1 kilometre square resolution as the sort of key one we wanted to look at across the board. And we know that, you know, in some respects you could sort of start to ask recorders and recording societies what they thought and get a range of different comments, sometimes consensus, some not. So we haven't got the time to do that really, and it's not a particularly repeatable process. Although, it's making the best of the experts you've got there. But in order to be repeatable and robust going forward, we need as much as possible an automated workflow, but some human checking and oversight of that. So it's very much a kind of a compromise process. But what that means is that we need to be fairly conservative in the cut of data that does come through to the species trends modelling. So we haven't sort of finalised that process, but I think as Adam and Roy said and know, and BRC colleagues know, there's a hell of a lot of experience in doing this out there. I mean, I'm VCR for South Hebrides in Scotland. I'm just at the minute validating records on the DDB, going through this kind of process of teasing out duplicates and FU records that need checking, some that will stay there, some that will be mapped, some that will... So I suppose what I'm saying is that there's a lot of experience. We haven't nailed it down yet, but we've got some good approaches to follow in sorting this out in the next year.
Great. We've got a comment then in the chat box from Colin Russell, who is the manager of one of the LURCs in West Wales, the one that I use, in fact, saying he just wants to add that LURC staff spend a lot of time actually deduplicating records. It's an ongoing job, and it's kind of part and parcel of what they do as well. Okay, great. So moving on, there's two quite closely related questions for you, Simon. Firstly from Emma Broad and then from Julian Hughes. So Emma's asking, although it's early days, are we expecting to see a similar number of species in the indicator 44 as on section 7? But then Julian is also asking, how will the indicator deal with changes in the composition of the section 7 list?
Yeah, both good questions, and there's not, because this is the start of the work, I don't have a clear answer to either of them, unfortunately. But what I can say is that the way the trends indicators are constructed at the moment, they do have to contend with changes in the list of species that can be modelled over time. Species come and go because some species started to be recorded much earlier than others. So the trends indicator has to be flexible enough to cope with changes in the composition of the list of species that are modelled. So we have a process to follow in that respect. In terms of changes in categories of species in the revision, that's really interesting, and it suggests that we might need to sort of revisit the LURC data and define new groups of species in consultation with NRAP and others for constructing another group of model trends that then fit into the composite indicator. This sounds a bit waffly because, as I say, we've just embarking on this process and we don't actually know what will happen. But as I say again, we've got a lot of experience in making the indicator as flexible as possible and tracking how those changes then impact the indicator that you see to avoid or quantify biases. So I've forgotten what the second question was because I was busy talking.
So the second question was about how you'll deal with changes in the indicator in the section 7 list. Sorry, the first question was about how are we looking at a similar number of species basically on the indicator?
Yes, yeah, because we haven't gone through the process of actually filtering the list for the upcoming indicator. We don't actually have a number, but what I can say is based on the review, it will be substantially more priority section 7 species than were considered previously. So again, I can't put a figure on it, but it will be more comprehensive and it will showcase to a greater extent the kind of wealth of biodiversity focusing on those rarer taxa.
Cracking stuff, good. One again really for Adam and Roy, an observation as much as a question really. I noticed that Mike Cunningham was asking whether the resources could be, links to the resources that you showed could be put up online, and then some links have been put in the chat for everybody. I noticed that the question came in just after your slide on the ecosystem resilience mapping, which was done for Brecon Beacons. Now I'm assuming that's a bespoke piece of work and is probably password protected, but that you'd welcome people talking to you if they want similar work doing. Would that be correct to say?
Yes, that's absolutely correct, and that works at a very early stage. We've not yet published any of our um, work on local high resolution ecosystem resilience mapping yet, but there are a couple of projects on the go, and hopefully we'll be one of them is through the LNP Cambry project, which I'll talk a little bit more about tomorrow for Swansea. But yeah, once those pieces of work are complete, there'll be some publicly available links to sort of examine the work and the methodology we've used. But yeah, so I can't provide the link to that web portal that I showed the picture of.
Yes, but these these systems are now becoming more common with this, if you like, and you've got the experience now in developing bespoke pieces of work for partners.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, great. There was a question that Simon, you magically seemed to answer almost as it came in about marine section 7 species being included. Just after that, then Claire Trotman was asking, what consideration is being given to them at the moment, the marine section 7 species for the indicator.
Yeah, all I can really say on that is really that we are charged with considering seriously how we deal with the marine domain. I have no idea, to be honest, what the LERC data sets can provide in terms of marine records. We've not really had that conversation, so maybe it's a bit of a one for Roy and Adam just in respect of what data they accumulate. But we will consider it, because it was sort of voiced during the NRAP discussions, and it's a fair point. Often we deal with the terrestrial and we slightly sort of forget maybe the marine, but it's important to deal with, and if we can at least put together some options for further consideration, then we should do so. That's what we'll do.
Well, it's a fascinating subject, and we could talk about it all day. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so in the interest of keeping everybody able to have a break before the next session, we'll call it a day there. So at